Hello, everyone. I want to take a minute before we head into our author chat to encourage you to become a member of Studio Potter today. You can access our archive of almost 50 years of content from around the world, and you can also look forward to new monthly content for only $5 a month. If you have questions about how to become a member or about our educator membership packages, or if you want to learn about other benefits of membership, please email membership@studiopotter.org. Thanks. Okay, so why we're here today is because we're going to visit with Meredith McGriff, who is joining me to talk about her work as a folklorist. In our September issue, Meredith wrote the article Presence Matters. The story focuses on her work as a folklorist, specifically as it relates to the Michiana Pottery Tour and the way community is built in craft. She also is the author of the book, The Michiana Potters Art, Community, and Collaboration in the Midwest. And although she has worked as a ceramic artist in the past, she is currently focused on researching and writing about pottery tours and other types of artist communities. And you can learn more about her work and participate in a pottery tour survey, which we're going to learn more about from Meredith here in just a minute, by going to caughtupInclay.com/research. And that link will be on Meredith's story on our website. I'll put it on our Instagram feed. And yeah, if you are part of a pottery tour, you should participate in that. So Meredith, thank you so much for writing for Studio Potter and for joining us today to talk a little bit more about the things you wrote about in your article. So can you start off by telling us, when is the Michiana Pottery Tour?
Sure. Thanks, Jill, for that lovely introduction. So the Michiana Pottery Tour this year, it's the 10th anniversary, which is really exciting, and it will be on September 25th and 26th, which is coming up really soon.
Meredith, will you tell us a little bit more about the survey that people can take? Because it's not just for, you don't want to just hear from people in Michiana. Who do you want to hear from, and how will you utilize the information that you gather?
Sure, absolutely. So, a lot of my research involves interviewing people, but it's also really nice to have things in a survey form where everyone can share information about the pottery tours that they participate in. There are dozens of these around the country, and I would really like to learn more about how pottery tours are structured, why they come about, how they help people, and possibly what some of the challenges are that people are seeing across the board. I know there's a lot of really great informal communication channels, and everybody's sharing great information already. But I would love to put some of that in a central place and be able to share back out, what some of the experiences are that people are having and how these are supporting pottery communities across the US. So I encourage everybody to fill it out. There's a lot more detail on there about, for example, I'll only communicate numbers in aggregate. I'm not going to share, what your sales are if you're not comfortable with it and things like that. There's a lot of opt-in, opt-out, and a lot of optional questions. So I encourage people to really engage at whatever level they feel comfortable. But I want to hear from as many people as possible. What is it like to be part of a pottery tour?
It occurs to me how you have noticed as a folklorist this shift to virtual pottery tours. How has that impacted community?
So I've been looking at that, and it's a really odd thing to try to study because I have to do it in front of my computer. And I don't feel like that's where I really excel. I want to be talking to people. I have had some wonderful collaborators in Michiana who've told me about their experiences. And I'm taking notes broadly, but that's a big project. And so part of the survey actually does ask how folks were affected by COVID and the shift to virtual. And I look forward to seeing what some of the commonalities are in those answers.
So in the article, I love that folded in with the article is it's not just focused on the pottery tour, but it's focused on your evolution from working as a ceramic artist to studying as a folklorist. And how I also love that you really parse out the difference between looking at the object and the people who make the objects. And I just wanted you to dive a little bit deeper here and tell me about, tell all of us about reading The Potter's Art by Henry Glassy. As you said, that was a pivotal book that helped you make this decision to shift into folklore.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up because I'm going to show everybody this book. This is the book that turned me into a folklorist. It's a lovely book. Henry went out and interviewed different ceramic artists all over the world, and it features, I want to say 6 to 8 different people working in different traditions, different countries, different types of clay, and creating all kinds of different forms. And what was really impactful for me was until that point, I was probably, I don't know, maybe in my early 20s when I first read it. Until that point, I had mostly been directed to art history books that were written, and nothing against art historians who I think have, a really important job to do, but so many books were speculating about the lives of people who were gone. And so many things were, you kind of get that like Western art history tradition where it's a whole lot of old dead guys, which I say a lot. And, there's some cool old dead guys, but I really wanted to talk to live artists. I wanted to learn about actual lived experience of making art. And art history for me was just, it was too much speculation. It was too much about what happened before. And I was really interested in what's happening now. So reading the potter's art, these are people who are working today. These are people that, if I had the money, I could go travel and maybe meet them. And I'm fortunate to have Henry Glassy as a mentor and a friend now in folklore studies. I could ask him for an introduction and I could go and learn from these people too, or I could support their work and purchase from them. And there was just something so gratifying about that approach that, really values everyday artists and people who are working right now. And I wanted to learn from the people who are going out and learning from people who are alive. So that's what led to that shift for me away from art history, which I had been encouraged to study. And I love what art history does for us, but it's not my cup of tea.
It's so interesting how we each find our own path. How it, yeah, if you're persistent and you keep asking the right question and checking with your own true north, that you, wind up where you want to be. So the article is really, I love that it's so uplifting and it looks at how community comes together and why it comes together. Conversely, there are a lot of conversations happening in the world right now about how communities have been exclusive and people who've been shut out of that. There's a quote I want to read from what you wrote. It says, "I hope now that my ongoing research and future publications will highlight this model of community building both within and beyond the contemporary art world in a way that could serve society at large, helping researchers in the humanities build a better understanding of how and why people choose to work together, and more importantly, how they do so productively." And you say big goals, yes, but I think it's a worthwhile front to be pushing on. And I love that optimism about it. But I'm curious, if in your own research, are you looking at the other side of, or are there other are there other folklorists who are looking at the exclusion and people who are shut out and like why that happens, and so that we can learn how to not do that, how to like be more open in our communities. And I, with that quote, I'm really interested in hearing about how you think that this research can be applied practically to help us be better.
Thank you. That's a really important question right now, I think, for a lot of fields. We're seeing those same conversations in folklore studies as well. Who's been included, who's not, who's been represented, who hasn't. And I think the importance of the research that I've been trying to pursue is that it helps us understand how to do it right. there's kind of a joke that, this is my first book. This was a community that let me kind of adopt them and learn from them. And I was so enamored by the things that they are getting right, the ways that they are being, they're being inclusive, they're mentoring people, they're making a commitment to their region, to make it a good place to work. And I was really excited to learn from them about what's working, because we need to not just identify the problems, but actually solve them. And I think that's, like I say, it's happening everywhere, or at least it's happening in a lot of disciplines right now. Folklore studies is going through similar things. And in my work there, I actually, I work with folklorists a lot because I'm the membership director of the American Folklore Society. And thinking about how to include people and how to help people feel that they are part of a community and valued is a really important part of that work. So there's so much crossover that I can see. One thing I talk about a lot is that, potters tend to work alone a lot, individually a lot. Folklorists are the same way. We're very small discipline. A lot of times if you go out and you look at your local university, there might be one folklorist there. You might go out to a museum, a cultural museum, there might be one folklorist on the staff. So there's folklorists all over the place, but a lot of times we're embedded in these organizations where we're the only one with our particular training, and looking at how we can do a better job of bringing people together and helping them feel recognized and giving them places to feel part of a community, even if that's not every single day, I think is really important. And so looking at how that happens in different professions is a big goal for me. I've been able to see how it happens sometimes in pottery, how it happens sometimes in folklore. I'm looking a little bit at filmmaking right now. And so there are absolutely folklorists who take on some really difficult topics. A lot of what we study is about how we form identity and how we form groups. And part of how you form identity is by saying, this is who I'm not. Part of how you form a group is saying, this is who's not part of the group. And if we can be more attentive and we can take those lessons from folklore studies and start applying them to the people who've been told you're not part of this group, or the people who have heard it. Sometimes you hear that message without it being spoken, right? Sometimes you simply don't get included. I've been working with the LGBTQIA section of the American Folklore Society a lot, and trying to listen to those stories. It's my story too, about, where were those doors shut even when it wasn't made obvious. And I'm really fortunate to have a lot of folklore colleagues who are doing that work in other arenas as well. So, big goals, right? Really big goals. But I hope that I can coordinate with other scholars and with other really smart people, artists who are, doing work in communities, to see how it can be done right. And, to also see where we've gone wrong and how we can begin to repair that.
Thank you so much. That was a really thorough and broad. I love the broad scope of even just looking at ceramics through the folklore lens. I love how it gives us the vantage point of stepping back and seeing these things with, I don't know, a little more breathing room. So thanks very much for that opportunity. And Meredith, I wanted to close out just by asking you to tell us a little bit more about your future plans. What are your big dreams moving forward with your research? You said this was your first book, and obviously what you gather from pottery tours will be something else, but yeah, what's on the horizon for Meredith McGriff?
Well, it remains to be seen. So much of what I end up doing is informed by the opportunities that come up and informed by the research and what I learn from it. I would say next up is probably a pottery tours book. I'm trying to make that happen. So what that looks like is yet to be seen. I also have this idea that I really do want to look at um, community in profession, and to look at a lot of different examples of how people build community within profession. And that's been done. I mean, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, right? There's scholarship there. Um, but this I don't know, this little piece of it that I'm picking away at is so much about people who work individually and still need a professional community. And so, how is that working in different professions? Why is that happening? I think I got a little into that in the article. Is why are we so drawn to build these communities, and what circumstances beget that desire? So that's where I'm headed, and we'll see where it takes me. I'm also just really interested in doing nonprofit work. I'm not a professor. I'm not really interested in necessarily being mainstream academia type person, but I love doing nonprofit work. I love actually doing work with communities and problem solving and learning and finding ways to exhibit these stories and this work, and to represent it out in the world in books or museums or other public formats. So we'll see what happens, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We will. Well, thank you so much thank you for writing for Studio Potter, and thank you for talking with me today and sharing a little more in depth than we can get into in one article, by chatting with everybody. And I guess I want to remind everyone who's watching right now that Studio Potter is not a megaphone for one voice. It is really meant to be a conduit for our community's voices. So if you have a story that you want to see written in Studio Potter, maybe you're the person to write it. And if you've never written before, I really don't want that to intimidate you. Part of my role as the editor is to support new voices. So please email editor@studiopotter.org, and let's talk about how we can get your article in Studio Potter. Thanks again, Meredith, and thanks everybody for watching. You can again become a member at studiopotter.org, and we'll see you next time.